So many ISVs would have already started some form of support. You might have started providing your solution to your clients, and support for those customers might have been a rather simple process. You might be able to work and jump onto issues and resolve them quite swiftly with your customers. When you're providing your fixes or upgrades to your customers, this might be straightforward, and the feedback that you normally receive from your users or the clients would be immediate. Those might have been very simple, but as your customer base starts to grow, this level of support becomes more difficult. Questions that you actually might ask yourself are all your clients on the same version? After you've performed some updates, would there be some configuration changes that your customers might need to reapply? After adding new features to your app or even expanding on the volume of your app, are your clients' infrastructure still up to spec? Why does your app work on customer A and not on customer B? Is it because customer B is making use of third-party software or hardware? You might have decided that you want to implement a support team to deal with all these issues, so that you can actually focus on your application and develop your application and deliver a world-class app and focus on what matters to you. This might actually work for a short while, but as you grow and you extend your customer base, you might have hundreds of customers, and obviously their demand for support will increase. This will obviously take up more of your resources and take up more of your time. So opposed for you developing and working on your app and becoming a market leader, you find yourself dealing more with support type cases and servicing your customers. You might think of moving to a cloud-based solution. So especially now that you're thinking of providing your application as a service, you're moving over to the cloud. This obviously adds extra complexity to your operation. Those choices on how you deliver support becomes critical to your success and delivering of your app to your clients. So this slide looks a bit detailed and a lot of dots over there explaining what various parts can entail when doing what you do best. So as an ISV, you should be laser focused on doing what you do best. If you look at the slide along the activity line, you can see you might need what you might need in order to deliver your business objectives. Then you might think of which of those are core skills that you are able to deliver, and which of those are skills or support or sections that might be outsourced or someone else can do. Whether you're providing a SaaS-based solution or a one-size-fits-all subscription or even a configurable solution as a managed service, the first thing you need to provide your customers is a place for them to go and log an issue or report a problem. That'll probably be your first challenge. If you look at the slide from a support perspective, then you might be thinking of first line, second line, third line support, maybe some managed infrastructure, security, and cost optimization. So the challenges are going to be discussed in the video, just as an overall slide of all the things I'm going to be talking about. If you're looking at support, you might be asking yourself, what should customers' first point of contact be? So it could be a help desk, and if it's a help desk, how do they contact the help desk? Would it be via a phone, a chat bot, a portal, or maybe through a ticketing system? Does the help desk, or are they equipped with doing initial triage and troubleshooting? And does that help desk go and resolve problems, or do they look at escalating or reassigning the cases or the incidences or tickets to a unique resolve group, like a specialist team? When looking at infrastructure, you might find yourself asking the question on who is going to do what when managing your infrastructure. This could be infrastructure, the security, the apps within that infrastructure. What would the challenges be? Would they be internal challenges? Would they be external challenges? Will they be both internally and externally? Then look at monitoring. Of course, you should be proactively monitoring your systems, or at least receive alerts or active alerts on issues. Should issues arise, then you should also be able to address those and remediate them within SLA. So monitoring and alerting and managing of all that is quite important. I do get into detail of that in coming slides. Reporting. So obviously reporting is quite important. When you're looking at reporting, you might be looking at reporting on SLAs for issues that have been raised by your customers. So are you delivering on those SLAs? Are you reporting on the progression of incidences? So if you have a ticket system, are you reporting on how long those cases are open for? Have they been escalated, reassigned? Things like that. How do your clients know that everything is working, everything is okay? Are you reporting on status? And then with reporting, one should expect real-time automated communication. So you have real-time automated reports, as well as scheduled reports. Detailed reports would normally be accompanied by meetings, so you can go through those reports and make sense of them. And then finally, your optimization and costing. So managing environments also means making sure that they're optimized technically. So for performance, reliability, availability, securities, and overall cost management is quite important when looking at optimization. So I'm going to move over to the next slides just to expand on these that in a bit more detail. So starting off with support, when it comes to support, you might ask yourself some of these questions. Does your app get used 24/7, 365 days a year? Will your app get used worldwide? Are you able to provide 24/7 support for your app? Would you be able to tend to, let's say, technical or critical system service down issues? Would you be comfortable dealing with infrastructure, security, data integrity, high availability issues, perform restores if required? How would you manage support issues and track their progress and escalations? Would you be comfortable dealing with multiple vendors? So it all depends on your app. If there is an app and it's leaning on other vendors, would you be comfortable dealing with those vendors? And also, would you be able to report or do detailed analysis of these issues and the support that you've provided? So there's a lot to think of when it comes to support. On my next slide, I'm going to focus on the example of one of our clients who make use of what we call help desk as a service. So this particular client, they're currently offering a franchise and a business-to-business model for their clientele. So I'm not going to go into too much detail of what they actually do, but just briefly what they do. They provide a software and hardware for a darts. So this is basically a game where you play a game of darts, and the system tracks the where the darts land, and it provides you live, real-time stats. So it cuts out all that having to calculate and work out a score. If anyone's familiar with darts, that's 301, 501, killers and crickets, you name it. But this goes on. So in the business-to-business model, the client provides the software and hardware to existing pub owners. So you've got an existing pub, they give you the software and hardware and obviously provide support on that hardware software. In the franchise model, this becomes a bit more complicated, and this is where we pretty much strive with the help desk as a service. The client provides not only the software and the hardware to franchise owners, but they also, and they support that proprietary software and hardware, but they also provide several other vendor solutions. So just for example, they provide a point of sale system. So that'll be hardware and software for the point of sale. They'll provide a payment solution. So that'll be Visa or your MasterCard. Because of the pub, they also provide a music manager, so they can play some music, booking systems for making arrangements and booking your table. And obviously all that requires internet. So they'll provide a network internet solution. So now as a franchise, you can imagine that they have to deal with multiple vendors and multiple issues. So in this example, where Cloud Direct come into is we offer the help desk as a service, which means that we do the vendor liaison and we do the initial triage troubleshooting. I'm going to just elaborate on this example is that let's say the pub manager has an issue with one of those vendors or one of those technologies I just mentioned there. So instead of the pub vendor having, or the pub owner, sorry, having to contact multiple vendors and dealing with multiple issues, they simply contact one person or one vendor, and that will be Cloud Direct. We are available 24/7. We have a initial triage troubleshooting information knowledge base, so we can do the initial triage troubleshooting and try and attempt a first-time fix. And if we don't come right to that, then we obviously liaise with the vendors and get feedback from those vendors, and then work directly with the reporting manager to look at the resolving the issue. And then obviously one very important thing is with this is that as we do cases and resolve issues throughout the week and months, we provide detailed reporting on the issues that were raised. This is absolutely very vital for businesses, and then they can do a summary of what the issue is and where their focus point can be on addressing those issues. So that reporting, time spent on cases and SLAs and all that stuff is really useful for the client. Okay, so I'm going to move over to infrastructure. So infrastructure is, there's a few slides I'm going to cover infrastructure because infrastructure can be quite a bit, and I'm not going to go into too much detail of infrastructure, but hopefully just touch on a few points that you might be thinking of with managed services and support when it comes to infrastructure. So the challenges mostly would be depending on the complexity of your application. You might have to manage either a small, medium, or large infrastructure. Again, the complexity of your actual application and its requirements and deliverables is going to rely on what your infrastructure is going to be and what you're going to need support on. So just to have a look at the environment. So environment, compute, this will be things like your virtual machines, your containers. So when you're looking at virtual machines, you might look at things like the allocated machines or virtual machines. Maybe even with the containers, you might be looking at connection issues to those containers. Obviously, access control is very important. Who accesses the VMs and those containers and permission to data. What parts of data are they allowed to access and not. You also would need to look at OS updates. And also possible upgrades to those VMs and containers and patching. Looking at server management, you would have to look at the various types of servers that you'll be using. So obviously dependable on your app, you would need to manage and store. You would have to maybe look at managing a web server or an app server or a very proprietary piece of server to deliver your app and the services. As for storage, you would need to manage your storage and perform things like site recovery, site replications, backups of that data, which also covers in the databases. You'll be looking at managing SQL databases or SQL database warehouses, so forth. This can also be things like access, backups, and also systematic health checks on your database. And then importantly, security and identity. I do get into a bit more detail in the next slide with regards to security, but overall you'd obviously need to manage your cloud directory, identity and access management, as well as permissions to your infrastructure. So if I slide over to the next slide, these are pretty much around your data. And I think a few things have been mentioned before, but as you can imagine, data security is very important. One of our clients deal with highly confidential information. So we actually provide an array of managed services for this particular client, and mostly centered around security and access. For this particular client, we make use of resource groups. And then what you can do is obviously you can apply those levels of security to the resource group as a whole, and also the various resources therein. Things that we do make use of is obviously identity and access management, role-based access control, resource locks and policies to be applied to those resources, encryption of data. What's also great about applying things via a resource group is that when you do billing for your Azure Spend, if this is all in Azure, is that you can actually filter according to those resource groups, which is a plus when you're looking at costs and where you're spending your money and where's the resources going, and that can all be done by sorting according to a resource group. As far as backups concerned, you also have to think about what you would be required when you're managing your backups. So making sure that your backups are all required in order to provide redundancy. Do you have a site replication? Are you doing the whole backup and disaster recovery? Are you testing, worst case scenario, if site goes down and you're doing a restore? So that's quite important as far as making sure there's redundancy when it comes to backups and data. For another client, we do provide a backup only solution. So that's like fully managed backup solution. And that's where we allow that client to actually focus on developing their apps with peace of mind, knowing that they are covered and they shouldn't have to be worrying about the replications and the backups and losing data integrity and all those goodies, which is probably the focal point with any managed services, giving you the time to focus on what matters to you the most. Okay, I'm going to come over to the monitoring section. So monitoring pretty much ties up to everything that I previously mentioned, and also a few things I'll mention in the reporting and the costs. The questions you should ask yourself when thinking about monitoring is what should be monitored. Most people say like everything. Maybe, but you obviously have to think that when you do have reporting and you have monitoring and you have logs and all that, that there's obviously cost implications involved in there. So you don't want to monitor everything, and you don't want to create alert fatigue where you have too much information and you don't know what to do with it. So when you have a monitoring, and let's say when an alert goes off, who takes responsibility for that reported alert and who ensures that it is resolved? So managed services will also look at that, looking at 24/7, 365 days a year's monitoring and management. So we do have an array of offerings as far as monitoring is concerned. I think they might have been discussed or brought up in previous webinar sections. But just to name a few, will be your Networking Operations Center, or NOC, which will mainly maintain optimal network performance. You're looking at the whole SOC, which is your security operations and security incident and event management. These are primarily used to identify and investigate and resolve threats, cyber attacks, both safeguarding your organization's assets and providing you with complementary coverage. One client we provide a NOC solution for is quite a renowned gaming company. They have a couple of gaming sites where users will log into. They will have blogs where they can chat and discuss the games. So what we actually do on those ones, we monitor their concurrent users, how many users are currently logged onto the gaming system. And what happens is it's good to see a nice volume, and if there's a sudden drop in the volume, that's when we start doing our investigation. We go into the various blogs and Steam, for example, or the gaming sites to see if anyone's complaining about issues. And then what we also do on top of that is we also provide them with usage monitoring, so seeing how much of the database and the pipes, various pipes and channels to those databases are being accessed. So if there's high spikes on that and then high database usage, then we need to obviously investigate that. In addition to this, we also do the patching of the servers. We do the backup and the testing of the restores, and this is all followed through a change management process. On the top of my head, a few other things that can be covered by 24/7 monitoring and management, especially for the Azure environment, will be your database, automated patching, event monitoring, application performance, platform availability, certification expiration. So if you have certificates that are expiring, you can get alert and obviously remedy the application of those certificates. Pipeline availability, status of environments, monitoring availability of your CI and CD tools. Yeah, so the list goes on and on for that. I'll move over to the next slide, which is the reporting. So for us reporting, it's important to understand, well, it's good to understand the importance of reporting. So several of our clients rely heavily on reporting. So regular reportings normally would detail things, for example, as the support that I mentioned earlier, incidences where what type of support we're providing the end users, what type of issues have been reported on, how long is the support team spending on those issues, or how much resources it's using. Are we delivering those supports and resolving those issues within SLAs? So we do have detailed SLA reports. Other things you obviously look at is escalation. So if it's been resolved first time fix or gone to a second, third line, or up to a unique specialist resolver group. And then obviously trend analysis to see whether there is a repeat of the same issues. So if you know, and especially if you're dealing with third parties, if that particular kit or software or application is continuously failing at a particular point, that's good to see that there's a trend, and it will help you diagnose improvements thereon. And then obviously there's infrastructure reports, looking at everything I mentioned with regards to infrastructure, the databases and securities and the applications. Reports that we do provide can be detailed into identifying exactly what is wrong with the infrastructure. Are there security threats? I'll discuss those in a bit more when it comes to the cost and optimization. But yeah, so is everything performing the way it should? And reports will allow this and identify that. So we do reports by schedule reports. So we can have this either raised within our ticketing system and fire off a report through our ticketing system to you weekly, monthly. And then also we provide the reporting via detailed report in a meeting. So we will sit in the meeting with you and go through the report in a bit more detail, highlighting focal points. And then obviously optimization reports. These are quite intricate. We do have a variety of optimization and advisory reports. These will basically help you standardize your system, which obviously then leads to a better efficiency. And yeah, we'll cover into my next cost analysis slide where I'll talk about those reports. Okay, so when it comes to making sense of Azure Spend, this can be a rather daunting task. There's a lot of data, a lot of information to absorb and then make sense of. So the main objective, obviously, would be to reduce your costs and improve your budgeting, and then most importantly, obtain great return on investment, because obviously infrastructure and all the services will cost you money, and then return on investment and help you work on cost and optimization is quite important and something we provide here in Cloud Direct. So just to go, there's quite a lot of detail in the VR, but I'm just going to touch them briefly to expand on what we do as far as our clients. We do have quite a large client where they had a large infrastructure, hundreds of virtual machines and infrastructure where they were running for quite some time. We did a whole lot of cost optimization exercise, and we actually ended up saving that client around about 20% of their Azure spend. So that's obviously allowing that 20% free money for the budget for things for the following year. So that's a great win for any client if you can save them 20% on their spend. So the question would be, how do we go about performing this? So what we do is we perform regular cost-efficient reviews or enhancements. This is something like automating resource management by switching off resources when they're not in use. So you might have virtual machines or disks, whatever hasn't been used. The automation resources will be switching them off. And also mapping your resources and your resource requirements to the workloads. So basically taking your resources and making sure that those machines or whatever resource it might be is kitted out for the workloads and the requirements of delivering your app. What we also do is we provide proactive cost management. So this will be like things like your right sizing, making sure that your resource within the Azure environment is per specs. So it's not a high spec, an underutilized resource. And by doing so, then obviously saving you costs on oversized resources. Also important would be licensing. We do make use of something called reserved instances. So that will be looking at a forecast of what your resources will be over a period of time, and then reserve instancing those resources. You also perform regular reviews of your storage vaults, backup policies against retention requirements. So that will also save you money in knowing exactly what retention requirements and if your storage and vault and backup policies are meeting those. And then removing deallocated virtual machines and unallocated disks, which I mentioned earlier in the slide. And then your past, present, predicted Azure billing forecast, basically breaking down your total Azure environment costs. So current versus historical spend, and with that also trend analysis. And then overall current Azure licensing, just looking at it, overall licensing as a whole. And then obviously your weekly, monthly cost trends. Then finally comes down to your cost management and reporting. This ensures that you have been added and done by the authorized personnel. So there's a whole change management process which we follow to make sure that resources have been added by an authorized person. Resource additions are in line with the technology strategy and also to adhere to your company policy. And then not last but least, resources are removed when they should be. So it could be in production, or sorry, in testing, or trial periods, or running a project. And obviously this would be helping to make sure that those resources are removed and that you're not getting billed for them 3, 4, 5 months down the line.